The far north is a vast and wild part of the tropics, most of it virtually unknown to the rest of the world. It stretches from Cairns to Broome, around 7,000 kilometres of coastline, or overland for 3,000 kilometres across some of the harshest terrain on Earth. Most of it's an unpopulated expanse, tropical rainforest and woodlands, or barren rocks and dry plains that are transformed every year by the tropical monsoon. It's a place where people are still eaten by wild animals, where guns are carried for safety, not for sport or show. It includes our most distant outposts, places that are totally different from the rest of Australia, parts that are more like the tiny island nations of the Pacific. It's the final stronghold for creatures that have disappeared from the rest of the world. And it's where an ancient people cling to a way of life up to 40,000 years old. This huge area we refer to simply as the North can be divided into 4 parts. We'll be going to Cape York Peninsula, the tip of Australia, and beyond the forgotten islands of the Torres Strait. The Northwest, a land of unexplained mysteries and unexplored potential. The massive unknown expanse of water that is the Gulf of Carpentaria. But first, we visit probably the most impressive part of all, the top of the Northern Territory. November, the very dry end of the dry season, when the first downpour of the monsoons can only be a few weeks or even days away. The temperature has climbed well past 30 degrees Celsius and is fast heading toward the 40 mark. It's very sticky. The humidity is around 90%. Massive mountains of cloud, sizzling with electrical energy, are signs of what dominates life over the top, an extreme weather pattern that's one of the most intense on Earth. Everything in the natural world seems exaggerated in the north. The tides, for example, rise and fall by up to 8 meters a day. Practically every part of the territory is 2 places in one, and the version you see depends on the time of day and, more importantly, the time of year. When the heat is constant, talk about summer or winter is meaningless. Up here they say wet or dry, and when the wet season arrives, the change is so complete that it has to be seen to be believed. Changes are dramatic, but to see them, you have to keep returning to the same spots from season to season. By looking in both wet and dry, we saw places like Yellow Waters in Kakadu change from a stagnant billabong into a river bursting its banks to create one of the world's great wetlands. For the most stunning illustration of the contrasts of the north, we go to the spectacular Arnhem Land Escarpment. We see gorges that slash deep into the ancient sandstone, narrow chasms and pinnacles of stone. Looking in the dry season on our first visit, there's not a trace of the flow needed to cut such deep holes in solid rock. The impression is of sleeping giants waiting for the change of season. At the bottom of sheer drops, we find small permanent lakes, home to shy freshwater crocodiles, deep cavities that in the dry are fed by small springs high on the escarpment. Places like this are among the most striking examples of how the seasons can change the face of Kakadu. This is how most tourists see the falls, just a trickle in the dry season when the roads outside are still passable. But in the space of just a few weeks, the monsoon rains come and they bring a transformation that's one of the most dramatic in Australia. Successive wet seasons over thousands of years are what shaped the face of every part of the north. Hundreds of crevasses in the rock, many of them eroded into long, spectacular gorges, were carved by rivers that gain the strength to gouge out solid stone for only one half of the year. And at the end of the canyons, massive but transitory waterfalls shave the gap further and further back into the face of the escarpment. It was this constant ebb and flow of water that created Kakadu National Park from the sandstone of the cliffs and the seabed of a receding ocean. The escarpment and the Arnhem Land Plateau now runs a twisted path from north to south, the entire length of Kakadu, and stretches far beyond the park boundaries for hundreds of kilometres. Believe it or not, down there used to be a great fishing spot. It's as if one day the tide went out and never came back in. Of course, it wasn't quite that simple. The change that meant this seafront cliff ended up so far inland was a very gradual process. 2,000 million years ago, even the plateau itself was a shallow seabed. The sediment was compressed into sandstone, and when the water receded, the intense weather did the rest. Pinnacles and cliffs were left more than 500 metres above the level of the ocean. An infinite variety of shapes were created, some of them balanced in an apparent defiance of the laws of gravity. Arrangements of rocks that look deliberate are the accidental result of centuries of the North's astonishing pattern of weather. For months before the arrival of the wet season's first rain, there's speculation on when and how much. Discussions on whether a long run of poor wets will be broken, and whether there'll be a cyclone. This year, the news is good. The heaviest rain in 15 years. The first inhabitants of this changeable land adapted easily to the slow transformation of their climate and landscape. They learned how to live with the annual change from drought to flood. The timing of the wet season and its intensity is the one annual event that dominates the entire year. So it's not surprising that some of the most imposing examples of ancient art ever produced are devoted to spirits who control the weather. This old gallery tells the story of lightning dreaming. Namaragon is a spirit figure. Some call him Thunderman, but to most, he's living lightning. His children, born in a storm, are brilliantly coloured and rarely seen grasshoppers. What happens between Namaragon and his gaudy children are among the signs that herald the start of the wet season for the Aborigines of Kakadu. It's said the children of lightning start the rains when they suddenly appear in the bush to call on their father to bring the storms from his camp, a sheer cliff on the Arnhem Land escarpment. body is ringed by a circle of lightning, and he creates his powerful thunderbolts by striking trees and rocks with axes on his elbows and knees. To the Aborigines, his home on the escarpment is a sacred, dangerous place. Any disturbance will bring thunder and lightning down on any trespasser.
He might hit you that lightning, kill you that lightning, you're dead. You never get life.
It's a warning.
That's a warning.
Bluey Ilkir is himself a painter, and he knows the power of the story behind the pictures. Namaragon is a spirit of great power, and the lightning dreaming tells how he can be called up by magic to punish people who break tribal laws.
And killed a lot, like a fire.
Would that be a punishment from...
That's a punishment, yes.
From the spirits?
From the spirit, yes.
Variations of the Lightning Man legend and other stories of the creation of thunderstorms are told right across the top end. One of the most impressive takes us further inland to a remote location south of Katherine that was hidden from European eyes until very recently. Tribal elder Bill Harney is guiding us to a series of rock art sites sacred to his clan, the Waterdemuns. A sign of how undisturbed this site is are the neat piles of human bones left in recesses around the rocks. Sharpening grooves for weapons tell of a long history of human use.
What happened, before they got down there, they flew over with a cloud.
At the heart of the gallery are the Lightning Brothers, impressive 3-metre figures that stand alone, too sacred even to have another painting on the same wall.
They've been in there for hundreds and hundreds of years anyway, and they're still clear today.
Bill told us that his people believe the Lightning Brothers themselves actually became part of the wall when they melted into the rock. They too carry stone axes to create bolts of lightning, and the Aborigines of this clan are forbidden to carry any axes in storms in case they attract a strike. And as Bill told us, that's not the only danger.
You know, you're not supposed to wear any red clothes.
Why is that?
Well, because the lightning hits the red, anything reddish. That's what they same thing again. You reckon it's because they smell of the blood. You know, that's what they say. Oh, well, I said, might be right, I don't know. That could be.
Not going to find out?
I'm not going to find out. Anyway, that part.
Despite the danger from their flashing axes, the spirits of lightning and the rainstorms they carry are always welcome for the new life they bring to the land. The wetlands of Kakadu have a rare, peaceful quality at the end of the wet season. At this time of year, the water levels are near their highest, and the constant cloud cover has broken, at least for the time being. The rains have created great winding waterways that cover vast areas of the park. These impermanent sheets of water are acknowledged as being one of the planet's most important wetlands. This tropical ecosystem was one of the main reasons for Kakadu being the first Australian region to be listed as part of the World Heritage. The slow-flowing waters stretch for hundreds of square kilometres, awe-inspiring in their size and beauty, but like this for only a few short months. At this time of year, the rich bird life of the wetland is dispersed, though a few individuals remain in the same small area all year round. The comb-crested jacana, also known as the lotus bird or Jesus bird, seems to walk on water as he scampers across layers of vegetation on the surface. His ability to float with the rising waters allows him to stay behind when other birds are forced to move on to safer nesting grounds. In the jacana family, it's the male who protects the nest, hatches the egg,